been getting a lot of requests for videos about writing and about the craft of writing. And if you're interested in, if you enjoy this this video, let me know, and I'd be happy to make it into a series. There's been some interest in that, and it's certainly refreshing for me to get to talk about things like this. And I spend so much time doing polemics on my channel that it's refreshing to get into talking about the artistic process and the creative process and that sort of thing. And so one thing, this came about from fans of my writing, from fans of Eros Empire, of Dark Therapy, Vessel Chronicles, all of that. And with the movie in production, there's been a resurgence of interest in my novel, Eros Empire. To answer one common problem right quick that people are having with that, some people have reported not being able to find it on Amazon. If you go on Amazon, it is there. You just have to go to the Books tab and pull and search under that. If you do just the general search, for some reason it won't show up if you put in Eros Empire. Actually, all of the Bear Manor artists are, or not artists, the Bear Manor authors are having that problem. Ben, who owns Bear Manor Press, is looking into it, trying to figure out what the problem is. But in the meantime, if you search for Eros Empire under books, that it should come up that way. It's also on Barnes and Noble, and it comes up without a hitch right there. And I know there's some other online sources that have it, and your friendly neighborhood bookstore should be able to order it. Anyway, so first and foremost, the first question that I was going to answer is the question I get asked a lot. Every writer gets asked this question, and it's, where do you get your ideas? And most people don't know, and they ask it in good faith, but rest assured it is one of the most aggravating questions writers get, because it's difficult to pinpoint. Rather than think about where you get your ideas, it's more about putting yourself in the mindset where you get ideas. And so, first of all, I do recommend, the best way to learn to write is to write. I mean, there's no course you can take will ever replace the act of just writing and writing continuously, and rewriting the same story. And it is hard work. It is a discipline. I actually, I can show you. I'm going to hold this far enough away that you can't see what I wrote, but this is handwritten stuff. This is actually handwritten for the next Dark Therapy that I'm doing. I write by hand because, and then transcribe into the computer. I can write straight into the computer if I have to, but I like to write by hand and then transcribe it into the computer, because that way the computer has all of my games on it, and it has the internet on it, and Twitter and Facebook and every social media, YouTube, all of that. So to make sure that I don't end up screwing off for an hour or 2 hours before I actually get any work done, I like to sit down with a blank or an empty desk and a blank sheet of paper and just write it out. And there's some soul to it too. There's something satisfying about seeing my my handwriting written out that way. And my handwriting is so bad it looks like, exotic calligraphy anyway. So that is very good. I find it's good to establish a writing space like that, a writing headspace, a physical space. And I love, if you look at like the Japanese kanji and hiragana, the way it's drawn with this brush strokes and everything, and it's just beautiful, like in the classic style on the scrolls and everything. It really does put you in just a wonderfully meditative mindset, and that's really good. Interestingly, there's a huge connection between creativity and exercise. It gets the juices flowing, and it also gives you time to think. And when I was a kid, I live in an apartment now, but when I was a kid, one of my chores was to mow the yard, and I would get so many great ideas while I was mowing the yard, so much so that my parents were understanding if I needed to stop and write them down. And so physicality, physical exertion is great for that. One, because it gets the juices flowing, like I said, and two, it's boring. And the more boring stuff you can do, the more creative you will be. And it's just like if you go blind, your other senses pick up to compensate. It's very much the same thing. Like, if you're bored, your imagination will pick up to compensate. And so there was actually, I remember hearing a news report, this was like decades ago, but I heard an NPR report about a study that was done with groups of kids, like young teenage, I believe, kids that were given sheets of paper with row after row of circles on them. And one group of kids did nothing for an hour. They had to sit and do nothing for an hour. The other group of kids watched TV for an hour. And then each group of kids was asked to take that page full of circles, and their page full of circles, and with a pencil, draw in each circle. And the kids who watched TV for an hour, they drew, they would all draw okay, happy face, sad face, grinning face, scowling face, and that was it, and that's as far as they could go. The kids that had done nothing for an hour, they did, one person drew two of the circles together and made glasses, made frames for glasses around them, and they would find ways to connect them, and they would do these beautiful designs, and every single one of them filled up every circle. And so there is some science to that, to saying to the boredom of it and physical exertion combined with that. It is wonderful for getting your mind working. One of my favorite writers is Haruki Murakami, and I'm reading a book of his right now called What I Talk About When I Talk About Running, and it's about exactly that, the idea of what does running do for the creative process, how does it affect his life and everything like that, and it's saying exactly that. And part of the effect is, one, the exertion, and then two, he talks about the lack of stimulation. He's just running, he's in his own little void, and he says he's actually not thinking about anything, but it's great for the creative process. Another similar work is Sun and Steel by Yukio Mishima, and he wrote about the same thing, and talking about how intellectuals stagnate if they don't experience good physical exertion. On top of that, there are a few books that I recommend reading about about writing. This is handy if you're just getting into science fiction. Writer's Guide to Creating a Science Fiction Universe. Just because, and that's George Oshoa and Jeffrey Osier that wrote that. It's a good read from a very technical standpoint, because when you write science fiction, there is so much. Even if you're just writing beatnik style William S. Burroughs psychedelic, science fiction noir type stuff. Even then, there is so much that you have to consider about the world and how it works. Maybe not if you're William S. Burroughs, but in general, there's so much that you have to consider about the world that you're creating. How does it work? Even if you're not going to talk about it directly in the story, you need to know how it works. Kind of like a great example of that is if you look at BioShock, the first BioShock game. The Rapture is breaking apart. It's flooding as the game goes on, and at one of the voice recorder memo things that you pick up is one of the architects saying, I told them you build it like a bathtub or it's going to collapse. And that's really cool, because it does ask that question of, it looks really neat to build this underwater world, but the way Ryan is structuring it, the water pressure would inevitably become too much. So things like that you really have to take into consideration, especially when you're writing science fiction, because so often, and we know this from BioShock, BioShock 2, BioShock Infinite, all of that, a great setting is so important. A beautiful, fascinating, engrossing setting is so important in science fiction, and you really can't emphasize that enough. You want basically you want every 8-year-old who sees your movie or reads your book or whatever to say, "This is awesome. I wish I could live here." And so that's really important. This is a good book for that, for considerations about things like that. And, things like, okay, if you're going to have a laser gun, how is it charged? What is the nature of what is the nature of the blast? How long does it take to recharge? That kind of thing. Things you don't normally stop to think about. Another good one, it's been a while since I went through this one, but Conceiving the Heavens by Melissa Scott. She's a female cyberpunk science fiction writer. Her stuff, honestly, she works the strong women angle, but it never gets lost in like asinine social justice minutia. She really does do a very solid job. So kudos to her. And then you also want to read books about critical commentary about literature. And when I say critical commentary, I don't mean like the Frankfurt School bullshit of critical theory. I mean actual literary analysis. A great, online by the way, a great source is go to Wisecrack. Wisecrack does a great job of literary analysis. Look at Thug Notes, look at Earthling Cinema, all of that. They are awesome. I love Wisecrack. That's one of my favorite YouTube channels. And for this exact reason, because they get into literary analysis in a way that really makes it very relatable and makes it very understandable in a very fascinating way. And those two series in particular, I also like 8-Bit Philosophy, but those two series, Earthling Cinema and Thug Notes, are both really fantastic for literary analysis. And if you already know those series, you know that Garrick's Formulon and Sparky Sweet's PhD are two of the best internet personalities ever. Anyway, this is I'm a huge Japanophile, as most people know, and certainly anyone that's read my Encyclopedia Dramatica article knows. But this is Anime, Experiencing Contemporary Japanese Animation by Susan J. Napier. This is a really good, I'm an anime fan, and this is a really good examination of so much of, understanding anime and its meaning, its cultural meanings, its cultural underpinnings, all that. One thing that I really took away from this, by the way, that I hadn't considered before, is one thing that's very unique to Japanese culture. Manga was coming out, the origin of manga was after the nuclear bombs were dropped, and people were holed up in their houses, they couldn't go out, it was disaster everywhere, and you needed something that could satiate people. You needed a form of entertainment that you could print very quickly and get out there to people, and that was kind of the origin of manga, or at least the boom and popularity of manga right there. And this is especially true of if you've seen Grave of the Fireflies, Barefoot Gen, or Gen, depending on how you say it. But anyway, things like that are stories, manga and anime movies about Japan and the nuclear bombs and all that. Something she talks about that I had never considered, and this is great, from a cultural standpoint, and this makes you think on a whole different level. But if you think about it, like in the West, where we have a very Judeo-Christian perspective on the apocalypse, on the end of days, like Judgment Day, and we will be raptured away to heaven or to hell, or however it goes. We have this almost poetic, romanticized interpretation of the apocalypse. And in Japan, they write from the very unique perspective of being basically the only post-apocalyptic society on Earth. You know, they have received the only 2 nuclear bombs that have ever been dropped on a target, on an enemy target, and so they live in a post-apocalyptic environment in a lot of ways. And that really informs Japanese culture. It informs Japanese society. Also, you know, if you look up, for example, research the rape of the Nanking, which the Japanese Imperial Army at the time was, you know, if you look up, go watch the movie Men Behind the Sun, for example. The Japanese invasion of China during World War II, put it this way, it's the only time that the Nazis went up against an opponent and came out remembered as the good guys. That's how bad the rape of the Nanking was. So you have the fall of this imperialistic, basically fascist culture that collapses when the Axis powers collapse, then and under the weight of the nuclear bomb. And that was this profound shift in Japanese society. I know Anita Sarkeesian, in her eternally bigoted attitude, said that we bombed them back to traditional values. No, actually, we bombed them forward into modernization, was what happened. And anyway, so in Japanese writing, and especially, and certainly in anime and manga and that sort of thing, there is this post-apocalyptic element to all of it. And that was very profound when I read that, because it made so many people that I appreciate, so many writers like Yukio Mishima, Haruki Murakami, also filmmakers like Kiyoshi Kurosawa. If you see Pulse, you know, it's a Pulse, or Kairo is the original name. It's, you know, that's a movie where for 2 hours nobody makes eye contact. You know, the effects of that sense of detachment, that sense of destruction, of desolation, plays into so much of modern Japanese culture. And you learn that reading good literary analysis. And this one in particular is really good because, like, it goes into hentai, it talks about hentai and the cultural meanings of all that, and it does it in a way where it is a serious, thoughtful, even-handed look, rather than just saying, oh, this tentacle porn is disgusting. This is really fascinating. And this book, by the way, I alluded in one of my videos, in my Dawn Hawkins video, I alluded to watching La Blue Girl on a plane one time. The reason I was watching La Blue Girl on a plane was because I had gotten a bunch of the DVDs that were of anime that was discussed in this book and was watching them, and so I happened to be on La Blue Girl at the time. It was funny, actually, by the way, going to get it. This was back when record stores were still a thing, and I went to the Virgin Megastore in Boston, and the anime shelf was right here, right? And on the other side of that was the porn section, and it was so funny because I was looking for DVDs, and on the other side there was this guy that, you know, was one of these turn up the collar on the trench coat kind of porn shopping guys, and there's this one DVD he was trying to get. He's pulling and pulling, and he kept trying to pull it loose, and he finally pulled it loose, and the whole goddamn shelf collapsed, and porn just goes everywhere. And he looks over at me and said, "And you were hoping no one would see you, aren't you?" It is awesome. It's the ultimate porn store humiliation. Anyway, the last book I recommend, I know this is going to seem like an obvious thing to me, but coming from me, I would really recommend this regardless of your political standings, your views on economics, or anything like that. The Art of Fiction by Ayn Rand. Regardless of what you, and it's very short, you know, it's only, what, less than 200 pages, you know, very short. Regardless of what you think of Ayn Rand and her writing and her views and all of that, this book, more than any, is an amazing guide to how to write fiction. Somebody just reviewed Eros Empire on Amazon and said that it was a triumph of romanticism, and if I may humbly say, it absolutely is. I mean, it's written in the romantic style, and I learned that style from reading this book. And there's so much to it that is so important about writing. And she talks about the difference between writing a romantic novel versus writing what she calls a naturalistic novel. And she emphasizes that there's nothing wrong with writing a naturalistic novel, and she even points to examples of her own writing that are naturalistic. But romantic is in the romantic style, every character embodies a philosophy, a perspective, an idea, a symbol. Every character is a symbol of something. And most people think that means that you end up creating a Mary Sue. You end up creating a character that's too perfect. A character that is more of a symbol than they are a character. And what I found was that it actually informed deeply the humanity of my characters as I incorporated those ideas. Some people have noted that, for example, like in Eros Empire, Billy Solar seems like more of a symbol than she is a literal character. And in a way that's true, because so many of the characters, their moral worth is determined by how they, and their quality of human being is determined by how they interact with Billy, because she is like this perfect love interest, perfect female, and all of that. But it actually really did inform my writing very deeply, and that's character development. Characterization is a whole other topic of discussion. So reading those books is very important, but reading books like that is very important. But as far as what that does is it gets you in the mindset of writing. It's kind of like, if you like blues music, you're more likely to come up with a great blues song if you know how blues works, and it's a very mathematical process. And just as I have written music in my sleep because I know that process, I've written stories, or I come up with ideas for stories in my sleep because I know that process. And one of my music teachers, a guitarist named John Finn, told a class of us, but told us something that's really stayed with me, and that was ideas are like being struck by, coming up with ideas it's like being struck by lightning. You can't control when you are struck by lightning, but you can do everything in your power to make it more likely that you will be struck by lightning. And that's very true. And so the things I just described are the things that make it more likely for you to be struck by lightning. But there is additionally more active elements to it as well, consciously. One thing is to remember, or to pay attention. Pay attention to language. Pay attention to odd expressions. Weird idiosyncratic things people say. You noticed on the roster for upcoming episodes of Dark Therapy, I have a story called The Hall Monitor's Girlfriend. That one is based on, it's a long story, but long story I won't share, but there's a dude that the guys in my band know, we nicknamed him the Hall Monitor, and we met his girlfriend one day, and my singer, Salem, said, let me introduce the Hall Monitor's girlfriend. And that stuck with me. And the reason it stuck with me is because we've had all of these stories that are like, the memory was the beekeeper's daughter, the memory keeper's daughter, the time traveler's wife, all of these things where it's the something's female relation, And Audrey Neffenegger is great, by the way. Go read her Fearful Symmetry. Now, that's an amazing book. But anyway, so we've had so many stories like that, and so that stayed with me because it sounded like something, that kind of thing, the Hall Monitor's girlfriend. And so I started thinking about that, and thinking about, well, why would that be significant? Because the hall monitor, when you're in school, the hall monitor is like the dorkiest position you could possibly have. And so I started working on that, working on those ideas. And what I start doing is I start thinking, I ask myself those questions, those exact questions. Why would it be significant to be the hall monitor's girlfriend? Well, the hall monitor is the dorkiest thing you can possibly be. So how do you make the hall monitor's girlfriend be something significant? And that's the train of logic, and that story I'm hoping to have done fairly soon. And that one will be another example of what I'm talking about, that there is a romantic, with a capital R, element to the storytelling. And so things like that. Another thing is to pay attention to what's going on in the world. The story I did for Dark Therapy recently, called Dangerous Playthings, comes from a few different places. One, the quote, it's based on a quote from Nietzsche, which is that the true man desires two things, danger and play. And so he desires woman, it's not verbatim, but he desires woman, which is the most dangerous plaything of all. And I read that a while back and offhandedly said to somebody, Dangerous Playthings would be a good name for a band. And we had already named Leaving Babylon at that point, or else we would have used that as the name probably. But as I was thinking about it, I thought Dangerous Playthings, that's a really good name. So I have a backlog, a mental Rolodex of different titles like that, and different ideas and concepts. And I knew that I wanted to do something about purity balls for a long time, because purity balls are very twisted and disturbing to me. I have a video on my channel called Purity Balls Remixed. Go watch that. That'll give you exactly my idea of what a purity ball is. The way I see it. Anyway, but Dangerous Playthings, that episode of Dark Therapy, I thought, well, okay, those ideas could go together, but that's just a premise. The purity balls is not a plot; it's a premise. So I was reading the news one day, and on the internet, and somewhere I read this story about this creepy thing that had happened, where a bunch of neighbors in this one neighborhood all woke up one day and went out to get the paper or whatever, or get the mail, take in the trash cans or whatever, and the families in the neighborhood that had children found baby dolls left on the front step of their homes that looked like their children, like the number of children, the ratio of boys to girls, the look of the brunette hair, blonde hair, whatever, all of this. And it was so creepy, because it's like, who the fuck did that? Who the fuck found out who is in, who the children of these families are, and dropped dolls that look like their kids at their doorstep? And I thought, because see, that's the thing. Once you start asking questions, that's where the idea comes from. Saying I want to do a story about purity balls doesn't give me anything. It's like, okay, so that's just a topic. But here, now we have something where we're asking questions. And as soon as you start asking questions, that's where your idea comes from. And that's what I thought with Dangerous Playthings. I thought, okay, why would somebody be leaving these dolls at people's houses? And I thought, okay, well, they want to prove a point. What point do they want to prove? And from there, that's where, and I'm obviously stopping short because I don't want to do any spoilers for people who haven't heard Dangerous Playthings yet or read it. It's one of the Dark Therapy episodes. Things like that. And then, of course, using experiences from your own life can be very helpful, very rewarding as well, and very cathartic, Vessel Chronicles came about, and by the way, that's been put on ice temporarily because I'm working on the movie. I do want to go back to that, and I would actually like to find a publisher for that and make it like a series, like the Brian Jacques Redwall, that kind of thing. But that came about because of my cat Dusty, who died, and Simba and Dusty were great friends. They were buddies. I mean, they were like brothers. And so I wanted to, when you're an artist and you're experiencing strong emotion, you always want to find a way to commemorate that, to ensconce it permanent, to take that feeling and make it something permanent. And I wanted to do that with Vessel Chronicles. And so my questions I started asking myself were, why do we have pets? Why do pets mean so much to us? And, I started thinking about those things as I was, grieving for Dusty, who died. And that really started developing the whole idea. And that's where that came from. And I always wanted to do a talking animals story like Redwall or Secret of Nim or Watership Down or something like that. And so that's where that idea came from. As soon as you start asking questions, and some other examples of that, Don't Feed the Trolls, for example, my first dark therapy story, Don't Feed the Trolls, came about because I was thinking about that phrase, and it was at a point where I was being trolled very heavily, and it was pissing me off. And I was thinking about what does that mean? Don't feed the trolls. And I thought, this is another great way to come up with ideas, is making a metaphor literal. And that was my thing, was like, how do I make this metaphor, don't feed the trolls, how do I make this metaphor literal? And the obvious thing is to have, orc type, troll things that are having food thrown to them. And that's obvious. So when it's obvious, I throw it the fuck out. And so I started thinking, and what does it mean to feed the trolls? What are you feeding the trolls when you feed the trolls? What does that mean? What does that take out of you? And that's where I started to get my idea. Once you start asking questions, that's where the idea comes from. I'm thinking, and then another topical example, Vigilance. The story Vigilance was obviously inspired by the whole George Zimmerman, Trayvon Martin thing. If you use the comments section of this video to turn it into a discussion about that, you will be blocked and deleted. First time, this is your only warning. Anyway. But that was what inspired it, and rather than do something about, obviously, and rather than do something about it specifically, like rather than try to recreate the exact scenario and do like my own, like something obvious, like the ghost of the murdered child comes back and it possesses George Zimmerman, or the George Zimmerman character, something like that. Rather than do something incredibly obvious that we've all seen on, countless, B horror movies over the year. My TV's over here, so I'm gesturing to that. Rather than do something like that, I wanted to try something, come at it from a different angle. We all have, everybody is mad about this situation. You got people on Zimmerman's side, you got people on Trayvon Martin's side. How can I step away from that and create a new perspective? What's the third perspective on that? And that was, the beginning of Vigilance, which I personally think is one of my better stories. Dreaming Strangers, another story of mine. That story was written because I was entering a Writer's Digest short fiction awards thing, and I was one year, 2012, I believe, and I was entering in all the categories. And Don't Feed the Trolls was the science fiction one. Dreaming Strangers was the romance one. Vigilance was the horror entry, the entry for horror. The Man with the Power Saw was the entry for crime thriller. And so things like that, and and by the way, a side note: The Man with the Power Saw. I'm pleased with the way it came out, but it really is. There's an old motif or trope, if you will, in mystery writing called the locked room puzzle, which is a dead body is found in a room that nobody has access to. That's the basis for that. I mean, it's I don't want to say it's formulaic because it's just that one thing, but everything with mystery writing, you start with the mystery solved and work backwards from there when you're doing the idea. And so that's where that came about. Anyway, Dreaming Strangers, the way that came about, I had never written a love story before. I mean, Eros Empire has a love story as part of the central plot. but it's not a romance. The point of the story is not that love story, although that's a significant element. So I was watching, I remember I was sitting there watching Indecent Exposure. I was going through Netflix finding romance movies to try to get my my brain in that headspace, and an Indecent Proposal came up, and I was watching that. It was a really good movie, and the thing I started thinking was, well, obviously, forbidden love is one of the main catalysts. Forbidden love is what drives so much of this shit, and so I was thinking about what could be the ultimate forbidden love. Like, we already have society, stories about society doesn't want these people to be together, and society this and that. And I was trying to think, what would be the ultimate taboo? And I thought, well, it would be two people that are drawn to one another, even though they personally don't want to be drawn to one another. And so I was trying to think, well, how would you do that? And I was thinking, God, to make that happen, you'd have to have multiple personalities. And I thought, boom, right there. And so Dreaming Strangers is a story about people who have two people who have multiple personalities that hate each other. The actual people hate each other, but their alternate personalities are in love with one another. And so, and that I thought that came out pretty well. Unfortunately, it didn't win, or at least I don't think it won. I cannot find the winners posted anywhere on the site or anything, but I figure if I won anything, I've gotten a check in the mail. But anyway, but I was pleased with that story. What I like is anytime I'm writing genre fiction like that, there are so many cliches. Like when I'm writing horror, I don't write werewolves, I don't write vampires, I don't write Frankenstein, I don't, all of these, certainly not vampires. Zombies, I am kind of interested in zombies, but I don't like, if I hear, oh, here's a horror movie and it's about, it's a horror movie about a serial killer that never dies, that can't be killed. Okay, well, that's just Friday the 13th, And there's so much formula in horror writing, like with romance writing, because they are those pulp genre styles where they want to be able to, the grindhouses want to be able to just churn out content. And so it's like, it's kind of like if I go in Barnes and Noble now, there's a lot of really good young adult fiction out there. If you have not read Unwind by Neil Shusterman, if you have not read the Unwind series, that is one of the most blood-curdling, especially, well, I've only read the first one, so I'm saying that I haven't had the nerve to read the other three yet. But if you have not read the Unwind series, that is one of the most blood-curdling, horrifying, dystopian future novels you will ever read. Seriously, it was deeply, deeply disturbing reading that. Unwind is a series of books about a future where children can be harvested for spare parts, and it's the idea is it's the answer to abortion. The abortion debate, the pro-life, pro-choice debate, is how do you have this thing where you can have it both ways? And the idea is you can't abort the child, and you have to keep the child alive up to age 12, I believe, 12 or 13. And through up to that point, life is inviolable. But then at that point, parents can have their kid retroactively aborted. So the organs are all harvested. The organs are harvested, every single part of the body, except for the appendix. We learn you don't have to keep the appendix, but all parts of the body are kept alive and they're preserved alive. So all of the parts of the body are removed and kept alive for organ transplants and brain tissue transplants and all that. They're kept alive, so life never technically stops, but you can have your abortion 12 years later. And I'm digressing, but it really is Unwind. Seriously, even if you only read the first one, seriously, it is some of the best speculative fiction I've read in a long time. That was a long derivation just to say that when I do go in, if I go into the young adult section at Barnes & Noble now, they have a whole section called teen fantasy romance. And obviously, that's just people cashing in on Twilight, is all that is. And so, I don't do, when I write things like horror, I don't do vampires, I don't do Frankensteins, I don't do werewolves, I don't do any kind of cliche, unless I can find a way to really turn it on its head, really do something unusual like that, like with the romance thing with Dreaming Strangers. Society not approving of your relationship, that goes way back. That goes all the way back to Shakespeare. That goes back to Sophocles. All the way back. Society not approving of relationships. We've been there, but two people that don't approve of the relationship they're having because their alter egos are having, their alter personalities are having the relationship. That's a different angle. So I'll write things like that. And so that is, as best I can tell you, the origin of where do you get your ideas? You get your ideas from asking questions. And start asking yourself questions. And I would advise, when you're in an idea stage, when you're writing, you really want to stay away from telling your ideas to your friends and that kind of thing too much. Not because they're going to steal them or run off with them, but because you don't want to. Once you tell the story to somebody, you lose a little bit of the drive to write out the whole story. That's a whole other topic. But anyway, I hope that was helpful, and that's the beginnings of the creative process for writing, is just asking, being observant, being fluid in how to write structurally, but then being observant and just being able to ask questions, ask unusual questions. And that's the origin of it. Just pursue that question that you might ask to its furthest possible extreme, and you'll be telling a story to yourself before you know it. So anyway, I hope that was interesting. Cheers.